movie footage used in any of the Slasher Scotty videos, including the body count, the rankings, and the top 10 videos, are entirely owned by the copyright holders. Slasher Scotty makes no claim of ownership and simply uses the footage for purposes of education, commentary, and criticism under the Fair Use Act.
Welcome everyone to The Body Count, where we tally up all of your favorite kills for all of your favorite horror movies. I am your host, Slasher Scotty, and before we go into what this week's episode is about, I would just like to say that this episode of The Body Count is being sponsored by The Fairy Squad Princesses, a preteen book series by author Marcus Motra. And I get it, it's not horror-based, but they are today's amazing sponsor, so show your appreciation and pick up your copy on Amazon today. The links are in the description below, and the book series is about 4 fairies that try to save the world from evil forces, and is based closely to the Winx Club, and yes, even Sailor Moon. Order your copy of all 3 books, with the 4th one set to release later this year. Now that we covered the sponsors for this episode of The Body Count will be covering Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers. Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers is a direct continuation of Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers, leaving off where the previous film ended and later picks up a year after the events of the last film. It has also got some new cast members as well as some returning ones, such as Dr. Sam Loomis, Sheriff Ben Meeker, Jamie Lloyd, and Rachel Carruthers. Michael wanting revenge against Rachel, Jamie, Loomis, and Sheriff Meeker, hence the subtitle of the film, goes back to Haddonfield, where his psychically linked and now mute niece Jamie tries to help put a stop to his killing ways. But obviously she doesn't do that, as we have a ton of bodies that Michael gives us to tally up. How many bodies does Michael add to his impressive resume on his ultimate revenge against Haddonfield? Let's find out. The film starts off with a title card, where we get a cool set of credits, and much better looking than the last film's credits with the pumpkin being carved. We then get a recap of the conclusion from Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers. He was shot dozens of times by the state police before he fell down into a mine shaft, where the added dynamite blast, which wasn't part of the last film, is used to blow Michael to smithereens. But unfortunately for the citizens of Haddonfield, Michael escaped through a side tunnel and floated down the stream of a rushing river. I'm sorry, but I cannot get the image of Michael floating down a water park lazy river. He looks way too silly. He then stumbled into a riverside shack inhabited by a local mountain man and then collapsed onto the wooden floor. It is now 1 year later on the eve of Halloween, and a now 9-year-old Jamie Lloyd was undergoing some monitoring and testing as she tossed and turned at the Haddonfield Children's Clinic during a thunder and lightning storm. She woke up screaming, however. Her cries were muted, as she recalled the final nightmarish scene of the previous film, in which she wore her clown costume and mask to stab her foster mother Darlene as a bath was being prepared for her. Jamie now retained a telepathic, psychically possessed link between herself and her uncle Michael after she touched his hand, and their movements mirrored each other. The traumatized Jamie experienced frightening visions and a seizure-like presence as she wrote on a chalkboard, "He's coming for me!" Michael awoke from his year-long coma at the same moment, donned his signature mask, and killed the mountain man, adding our first victim of this episode to the body count. Dr. Loomis interrupted Jamie's emergency treatment to open her trachea, asserted that she would stabilize, and then the recuperating mute Jamie was visited in her clinic room by her foster sister Rachel, her annoying friend Tina Williams, and their dog Max. Uh-oh, another dog. Another dog is introduced into the franchise? I mean, you know what this means, right? People in Haddonfield really need to stop adopting dogs! Shortly later, they were joined by Dr. Loomis. A rock was thrown through her window that contained a note, and that note read, "The evil child must die." Dr. Loomis feared that the whole series of events at Halloween time might happen again, and the inhabitants of the town were irrationally scared. As Rachel returned to her red brick Haddonfield home with Max, the masked Michael watched her from the nearby bushes. In her art class, Jamie sensed a premonition of death and believed that Max was in danger as Rachel was being stalked at her house. Dr. Loomis phoned Rachel, interrupting her shower. Nude and wrapped only in a towel, Rachel fled from her house when ordered to do so by Dr. Loomis, and shortly afterwards the police showed up and found no evidence of foul play, and Max was then returned home safely. And of course, these cops had to be followed by some silly clown sound effects. Yes, that's right. We went from Sheriff Brackett and Deputy Hunt helping Loomis to find Michael to these comedy clown cops that cannot shoot their way out of a paper bag. Later, Rachel was getting dressed in her upstairs bedroom. Myers again appeared in her closet as he watched her put on her clothes. In another room, after Rachel found a framed picture of her foster sister Jamie with cracked glass, she was suddenly stabbed in the chest and shoulder with a pair of scissors, wielded by Michael, adding her to the body count. I'm sorry, what? Yes, that's right. Last film's heroine was just killed in the first act of this film. And fun fact, according to Rachel actress Ellie Cornell, she wasn't very happy about dying so early, and her original death was to have these scissors shoved down her throat, to which she has requested to have changed, and this was successfully obliged by the production team, unlike her early demise request. This violent death caused shaking and convulsions throughout Jamie's body, and in the police department, the crazed Dr. Loomis recalled the emotionless killer of the previous Halloween with Sheriff Meeker. They were both then summoned to the local cemetery because a 9-year-old girl's grave was dug up. Tina arrived at Rachel's home, and there was no sign of evidence of Rachel. Tina is excited for the weekend Halloween party while Rachel's parents were away with her friend Samantha Thomas and their respective boyfriends Mike and Spitz. Although Michael was in the house spying on them, nothing happened, although he did soon turn up at the children's clinic. A terrorized Jamie thought she was being stalked by Myers himself as she fled through the clinic's corridors, the laundry room, and the basement's furnace room, although it was just the clinic's gardener, not Michael Myers. Dr. Loomis badgered Jamie and begging her to help him find Michael. A Chicago-bound bus arrived in Haddonfield where an unidentified man, dressed in all black from his trench coat to his silver steel-tipped boots, disembarked. Dr. Loomis took his gun into the Myers home in town, and it was completely in disrepair and overgrown with weeds. He called out for Michael as he roamed through the dusty, vacant rooms. The mysterious stranger with boots, who also had a tattooed ruin on his wrist, which is similar to that of the one on Michael's wrist, was also in the house. Food Mart store clerk Spitz, the boyfriend of Samantha, put 3 cases of stolen beer into Mike's nice-looking ride for their planned Tower Farm Halloween party later that night. Michael Myers scratched Mike's freshly waxed and polished convertible with a garden claw implement. When he challenged Myers, Mike was grabbed by the throat from the other Mike and stabbed him in the face with the 3-pronged claw tool before Mike drug Mike away, adding Mike to the body count. Holy Mikes! A costume pageant was being planned at the children's clinic, and Jamie was dressed as a pink princess with a tiara, and their one friend Billy was dressed as a pirate. During the pageant, Jamie fainted and started convulsing again. This was due to the impending danger to Tina. In front of Rachel's house where the black-garbed stranger stood, Tina was dressed as a sexy room service maid, and she was picked up by the masked Michael driving deceased Mike's car. He was wearing her present to her boyfriend Mike, which was a grotesque, bulbous-nosed mask. Tina would kiss Mike, not boyfriend Mike, as she wasn't aware that her boyfriend Mike was dead, and called him a psycho boyfriend when he screeched to a half in the middle of the street to stop for cigarettes at a gas station convenience store. Ah, now I see why they named her boyfriend Mike. It was to set up this, weird scene. Got it. Stuttering out a few words, Jamie was able to warn Dr. Loomis about Tina's location, which was identified as Bill's gas station at 5th and Main, known for selling giant cookies, and police were radioed to intercept and protect her there. As Michael, with his own mask now, driving away before the police arrived, and when Tina is united with Jamie at the clinic, the young girl was able to speak. and expressed her fears that Tina was going to be the next victim of the boogeyman. Two state deputy police officers, Deputy Nick Ross and Deputy Tom Farah, who were ordered to follow Tina and drove her to the Tower Farm party, unknowingly leading Michael Myers to her location. Seen intermittently and intercut into the next few scenes, Jamie and Billy ran on foot to the farmhouse so they can warn Tina about her life being in grave and mortal danger. At the Tower Farm, Tina, Samantha, and Spitz played a prank on the two buffoonish officers, the two females pretending to be assaulted by a knife-wielding masked Michael Myers, which was actually Spitz in costume. In the farm's barn, which was adjacent to the farmhouse, the trio ran after some kittens. When Tina returned to the house, Spitz and Samantha were prepared to make love among some straw bales. Spitz was added to the body count when he was impaled with a pitchfork through the middle of his back, splattering blood onto Samantha's breasts underneath him. After this, Samantha was next added to the body count when her body was sliced and diced with a curved scythe. Outside, the two deputies, Ross and Farah, were innocently assuming that Spitz was still wearing the Michael Myers mask. Afterwards, Tina, who went looking for her missing friends in the barn, and found their bloodied corpses as they rolled onto her. She fled screaming to the house and came across the doofus police duo, who were both stabbed multiple times with a pitchfork in their squad car off-screen and were added to the body count. Jamie and Billy arrived at the farmhouse, and they, along with Tina, were chased by Michael. Michael chasing them in a car throughout the bushes, and eventually he ends up hitting a tree. This causes a fire, and Michael, who is obviously not dead, rises up from the incinerated car and comes after Jamie. Tina jumps right at Michael, risking her own life for Jamie's, and is stabbed in the chest with the big, pointy, sharp knife, and is officially added to the body count. Sheriff Meeker and multiple police cars arrived at the scene as Dr. Loomis saves Jamie and Billy. Loomis asked Jamie in the ambulance if she is willing to help him, and she agreed to do so. Loomis spoke facing the woods that surrounded the crime scene to lure Michael back to his old house in town where it all began, and he is using Jamie as bait to do it. Jamie then sat conspicuously in view of the second-story window of the large Victorian-style Myers house, protected by Deputy Charlie Block, and she was planted there while the other officers and Dr. Loomis surrounded the home and guarded it from the inside. The massive operation was circumvented when a distress call from the clinic diverted most of the police force to that location. Dr. Loomis predicted that Michael will now come, and outside of the house, Deputy Eddie Gray was added to the body count when his parked police car was rammed from behind and his face was repeatedly smashed against the steering wheel. At gunpoint, Dr. Loomis coerced Deputy Block to remain in the house and to proceed with the original plan. Deputy Block attempted to escape with a rope ladder extended from the second-floor window as Michael burst through the door. He emptied his gun into Myers with 10 shots with no visible effect and was hung in one of the rope ladder nooses outside of the window and added to the body count, while Jamie also then fled to another room. Sheriff Meeker supervised as the bodies of two victims of Myers were taken out on stretchers at the children's clinic. The first scene was Dr. Max Hart, the doctor of the clinic who tried to open Jamie's trachea in the beginning parts of the film, was added to the body count with unknown injuries in an off-screen kill. The next one is Nurse Patsy, and she was added to the body count also with unknown injuries in an off-screen death scene. Jamie's screams echoed in the laundry chute as she dropped to the basement and then valiantly struggled to climb away from Myers' frenzy stabbing knife through the metal grate of the chute. She managed to emerge from the chute on the next floor up and then found herself in a candle-lit attic of the Myers house, with it littered with the displayed bodies of Michael's bodies that he added to his arsenal, with the likes of Tina's boyfriend Mike, Rachel, and Max. Of course he killed the dog. As Michael approached, she laid in a coffin, which is the one that Michael dug up earlier in the film at the cemetery after removing the dead body of a 9-year-old girl from it, and she was ready to accept death. As he raised his sacrificial knife, she called out to him, "Uncle?" She pointed at her eye and requested that he remove his mask so she can see his eyes. He paused and then removed his mask, to which she stated that he looks just like her. A single tear trickled down Michael's cheek. She went to wipe it from his cheek, and he reacted wildly and continued his raging impulse. She ran down the stairs and directly into the arms of Dr. Loomis, who cried out if he wanted her. Using Jamie as bait, he led Michael into a trap into the living room. A heavy metal chain net was then dropped from the ceiling and onto Myers. Dr. Loomis fired 4 tranquilizer darts into the seized madman and then started to beat him unconscious with a wooden plank. Dr. Loomis then collapsed on top of Michael, later revealed in the next film that he had a stroke. This was initially supposed to be the end of Halloween and this story arc, but we all know how that happens, right, Brady?
Well, money talks and bullshit walks, you know what I mean?
Myers was taken into police custody and placed temporarily in the Haddonfield Police Department's jail for future transport to a maximum security facility by the U.S. National Guard, where Meeker claimed that he'll stay until the day he dies. Jamie added that he'll never die. In a patrol car outside, as Jamie awaited transportation back to the clinic, an explosion rocked the jail. The black-garbed stranger with silver steel-tipped boots had entered the police department and murdered Sheriff Meeker, Deputy Tony, and 6 other police officers, adding a slew of officers to the body count. And in the aftermath, Jamie walked through the carnage all around and looked at Myers' cell, only to find out that Michael Myers is no longer there and the cell is empty. She then sobbed and screamed, "No, no," as we go to credits. Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers, dives further into the Curse of Thorn story arc, and that is heavily influxed in the next film, and the next film is the last one to do the storyline. We also find out who the Man in Black was and dive more into Michael's backstory and even find out who taught him how to drive. Well, that being in the producer's cut of the film, but it is revealed nonetheless. Michael's revenge was jam-packed, but did he add more bodies in his revenge against Haddonfield over his return to Haddonfield? Let's find out at the numbers. Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers was released on October 13, 1989 and starred Donald Pleasance, Daniel Harris, Ellie Cornell, Bo Starr, Wendy Kaplan, Tamara Glynn, Matthew Walker, Jonathan Chapin, Jeffrey Landman, and Don Shanks. There were a total of 20 deaths in Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers, with 16 of them being male and 4 of them being female, which gives us a ratio of mostly blueberry in our gender ratio pie chart. The Slasher Scotty gold ribbon for coolest kill goes to Mike. Not Mike the killer, but Mike the car-loving boyfriend of Tina. His death was pretty cool, and his twitching when he was stabbed with the gardening tool was quite impressive and effective. The Slasher Scotty silver ribbon for lamest kill will be given to the 2 clownish deputies that were stabbed off-screen with a pitchfork. Not just because it was an off-screen kill, but they just were a lame effect at comedic policemen that just didn't mold well into this film, and the sound effects devalues them even more, if that was even possible. Make sure to subscribe to my channel, as there are plenty of videos to come, including interviews with celebrity guests, as well as some rankings videos, top 10 videos, the SSN, otherwise known as Slasher Scotty News, and of course the body count, where we'll be diving headfirst into Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers next week, which has a funny story on why the subtitle has curse in it, which I'll tell you all next week when we cover this film. But until then, I am Slasher Scotty, and this has been The Body Count. Be good people.